The Department of Homeland Security is apparently on a huge ammo buying spree.
It comes out to like 1.6 billion rounds.
One thing that has unified Democrats and Republicans, and everybody in between, is that we all hated the bank bailout.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
The time to choose sides is now.
Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Thursday, August 7th, 2014, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, defense officials say Vladimir Putin is testing U.S. command and control systems as Russian strategic nuclear bombers have flown into northwestern U.S. air defense zones. Meanwhile, the trade war also intensifies as Russia bans the import of U.S. food. Then, explosive Jackie O tapes reveal how she believed LBJ killed JFK. And Lyndon sounds like he's flirting just days after the assassination.
You just come over and put your arm around me. That's all you do. When you haven't got anything else to do, let's take a walk.
Really, Mr. President? Really? All that plus much more up next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Well, war is the lifeblood of the state, and of course the Obama administration is grasping for air, so they're grasping for excuses. They're starting up Cold Wars, they're starting up the trade war, they're starting up proxy wars everywhere. Let's go to the Cold War first. We had an article today on INFOWARS.com from Steve Watson. Cold War II. Russian nuclear bombers are conducting 16 incursions of U.S. and air defense zones over just the last few days. He says Russian strategic nuclear bombers have flown into the northwestern U.S. air defense identification zones at least 16 times over the past 10 days, according to Pentagon officials. The incursions are by Tu-95 Russian Bear H bombers, and they say that this is unprecedented. Well, of course, if you poke the bear, the Russian bear, he is going to poke back. The Russians are not going to be intimidated, and we see this with the trade war now that's intensifying. So we point out another article from Kurt Nimmo on INFOWARS today. Trade war intensifies as Russia bans the import of U.S. food. Now, of course, this is hurting both Russians as well as Americans. It says trade between the U.S. and Russia has more than tripled over the last decade. Meat from the U.S. represented 19% of the trade between the two nations, and Russia is one of the largest export markets for American chicken. 39% of total U.S. chicken exports went to Russia in 2008. Now, of course, it's also the EU that's being hurt by this because $43 billion worth of food last year was sold by the EU to Russian markets. And of course, Russia considers economic sanctions to be warfare, and they have vowed to respond in kind. And of course, they are going to respond in kind. Now, later in the program, we have an interview with a former SEAL and currently a fiction author. Of course, the books that he writes are not all that fictional. They have a lot of parallels to the real world, to real politics, to real scenarios that we have to be concerned about. Now, coming up, we have an interview with Matthew Bracken, and during the interview, he said something interesting. He said, today, it's kind of like we're sitting in a room full of dynamite, and there's like a dozen different fuses running out of it. We don't know which one of them could possibly cause a massive societal change. Now, one of the things, of course, possibility is the Ebola situation. We have an article up today on INFOWARS.com, what you need to do to survive Ebola before the panic sets in. And this is from Max Slavo. And it's an interesting article to read. I'm not going to go over all the different things he says, but take a look at this picture from the article. And of course, when we talk about there's multiple things that could happen to cause societal panic, he points out with these empty shelves, this picture, he says, look at this picture. It was taken last week in Toledo about an hour after the city announced that their water supply had been contaminated with toxins. Now, if you look at this article further down, there's a long list that he compiles together from the Organic Prepper of all the different things that you need to prepare for an emergency. And that's not just if it's a pandemic. That's any kind of emergency, a military emergency, some kind of martial law that's imposed for whatever reason. You need to be prepared. Finally, as he points out, if you don't have your food prepared, your water prepared before the crisis starts, you're going to go without it. Now, we always hear the term conspiracy theorist, and it's interesting to note that this is a term that was created by the CIA in the wake of the JFK assassination, deliberate as an attempt to shut down any questioning of the official story. Well, it turns out that one of the original conspiracy theorists was Jackie Onassis, or Jacqueline Kennedy at the time. Today, we learned that some explosive tapes are being released now that were going to be held for 50 years after her death, and now here we are about 20 years after they're starting to release these tapes. The wife of President Kennedy did not believe that there was a lone gunman with a magic bullet. No, she thought that LBJ was behind this. Now, the tapes that are being released were tapes that were recorded with historian Arthur Schlesinger just months after the assassination. But listen to this phone conversation between Jackie Kennedy and LBJ just days after the assassination.
Mr. President?
I just wanted you to know you were loved, and by so many and so much.
Oh, Mr.
I'm one of
President.
them. Listen, sweetie, now, the first thing you got to learn, you got some things to learn, and one of them is that you don't bother me. You give me strength.
But I wasn't going to send you in one more letter, and I was
Don't
just
send
scared
me
you'd
anything.
answer.
Don't send me anything. You just come over and put your arm around me. That's all you do. When you haven't got anything else to do, let's take a walk. Let's walk around the backyard and just let...
I know how rare a letter is in a president's handwriting. Do you know that I've got more in your handwriting than I do in Jack's now?
So there are not many women, you know, run around with a good many presidents. So you just bear that in mind, and you got the biggest job of your
She
life.
ran around with 2 presidents. That's what they'll say about me. Okay, anytime.
Goodbye, darling.
Thank you for
Bye.
calling, Mr. President.
Bye,
Goodbye.
sweetie. Do come back.
I will.
Now, if you listen to that entire clip, and you may have heard it just from the excerpt that we played, Jackie Kennedy is very scared. And yet LBJ is like coming on to her, and she plays along with that a little bit as a way to try to protect herself and her family. She tried to keep these tapes, these historical tapes that are now being released, she wanted those held for 50 years after her death. She was concerned that people in her family, perhaps her son, John Jr., might be killed by people who are enemies of the Kennedys. Now, as creepy as that is, we have a story coming up in the next section right after the break about a Homeland Security behavior officer who was trying to come on to a woman and her daughter at the same time. This is the kind of corruption from the top down that we have to be concerned about. It's what Colonel Pete Martino, retired Marine colonel, told us about just a few days ago that we played on the Alex Jones radio show. The fact that corruption is really the main problem. When you don't control that corruption, it becomes pervasive. Many times people don't believe in things like the Kennedy assassination or that someone engineered aspects or covered up aspects of 9/11 because they just can't believe that the good guys could do this. And they think that it's going to eventually come out. Well, yes, it does eventually come out. All secrets eventually come out. We now know, because Operation Northwoods has been declassified, we now know that they were plotting at the time to fly passenger airplanes into buildings. Back in the 1960s, when JFK found out about that, he fired the people in charge. They then went, the main guy in charge then went to Lemmerser, went to NATO. He was involved with the false flag operations there in Gladio. So these types of things do come out. The question is, will people believe it when you connect the dots for them? And it's just been 50 years ago, just Monday, that we had the Gulf of Tonkin. Think about the fact that it was only about 8 months ago that we had the 50th anniversary of the JFK assassination. They didn't wait very long to go from getting the guy who was in their way out of the way before they could escalate the Vietnam War, did they? Now, that's what we're seeing now. We need to see what's going on with the CIA most recently. Why do we have to wait 50 years to find out about these crimes? We have an article that's breaking today from Gawker. This is from a girl who was 12 years old at the time. She was rendered, along with her family, from Hong Kong to Libya in a joint CIA MI6 operation in 2004. That's American and British intelligence took her out. And I want to read you this excerpt because it's very moving. She said 2 different flights landed at the military airport in Libya just over a decade ago. The first was organized by the CIA and MI6, and on board that was a family of 6, surrounded by guards. The frightened children separated from their parents, the father chained to a seat in a rear compartment with a needle stuck in his arm. The second flight, only a couple of days later, carried Tony Blair in comfort on his way to shake hands and to do business with Colonel Gaddafi. I know about the first flight because I was one of the children. I know about the chains. I know about the needle because Sami al-Saadi, a longtime political opponent of Gaddafi, is my father. And I saw him in that state. I was 12 years old at the time, trying to keep younger brothers and my 6-year-old sister calm. She said they called her to the plane. the front of the plane to say goodbye to her father, to see him in that state. She says, "I remember the guards laughing before she fainted from the sight." And she says, the question is, are the American people going to be allowed to know about what happened to her, this 12-year-old, and her family? Or is the CIA going to be able to keep that secret? The information right now is sitting on the desks of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The question is, are they going to be allowed to redact that, to keep it from the American public for even longer period of time? Think about what's going on with this. Henry Kissinger said that we don't have any permanent allies, only permanent interests. It appears that the government's interest is really to create chaos. They want us in a permanent state of chaos. Remember what happened in Libya. This was 2004 that this had happened, but go back to the Reagan administration. Remember that Gaddafi was the most dangerous terrorist in the world at that time. He was Reagan's Osama bin Laden, a very useful foil. We were told, maybe it was true, that he took down the airliner at Lockerbie, Scotland. We then bombed him. He then gave up his weapons, and then he became a client of the American police state. The CIA became his buddy. At this time now, in 2004, under the Bush administration, now Gaddafi is our friend. And they are taking people who had opposed him, people who were previously our allies, are now our enemies, just like in 1984. So they take this guy out with rendition, they stick needles in his arms, fly him out the dead of night back to his enemy, Gaddafi, and they take away his family. This is our American foreign policy. This is why everyone in the world hates us. And this is why we should be concerned about our rotting government. Think about that. Now, this is Libya. That was 2004. And then in another 7 years or so, Obama goes back to Libya, starts a war without Congress's authorization, an impeachable offense, by the way, for which Congress will not impeach him, will not get rid of the corruption. And then, of course, we have Benghazi, where they're passing weapons to the people in Syria, the rebels in Syria, who later became ISIS, that are now fomenting other chaos throughout the Middle East. This is our foreign policy. We need to see this information. The American people need to wake up about this. Stay with us. We're going to be right back this week. The Black Hat Conference is starting in Las Vegas. We have news about that and news about the incredible links that the American government will go to spy on you. They can get very inventive. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
City of Austin tap water versus filtered City of Austin tap water.
I can taste dirt in it.
God knows what's in this.
This has an aftertaste.
Tastes like Austin water? Yeah, it does. Ugh.
These people just sampled City of Austin tap water straight from the faucet. Next, we had them try a sample of tap water filtered through the ProPure G2.0 filtration system.
High quality H2O.
That one is better.
Tastes like nothing.
Yep, I know what good water tastes like. It's good water.
Most tap water contains added substances like fluoride, chlorine, Monsanto's deadly pesticide, glyphosate, and many others. Studies prove that these substances are linked to an assortment of major health issues, including tooth decay, lowered IQ, and even cancer.
It tastes like you're drinking out of the lake when you're drinking tap water.
Yeah, it has that processed flavor to it.
The ProPure G2.0 filtration system removes these deadly substances and many more, leaving only fresh-tasting, deliciously clean water.
Okay, this is very tasty.
It's good water.
Refreshing.
It's good.
Go to InfoWarsStore.com today. Use promo code WATER and save 10% off your ProPure purchase. Again, that's InfoWarsStore.com or call 1-888-253-3139.
The facts are in. The studies are legion. Sodium fluoride and other toxic members of the fluoride family are devastating the health and cognitive ability of the American people. I am extremely excited to announce the exclusive INFOWARS Life Fluoride Shield formulation, fusing 6 of the best documented ingredients from around the world to help the body remove not just toxic fluoride residues from the body, but a whole host of toxic substances. Secure your fluoride shield at InfoWarsLife.com today.
Well, in simpler times, it was much easier to have privacy.
Do you want me to leave the room?
That won't be necessary, Hodgkins. We can talk under the cone of silence.
The cone of silence?
I am deeply concerned about the conference room. What? I'm concerned about the conference room. How's that?
Well, of course, that was Don Adams and the TV show Get Smart. Now today, even if that cone of silence had worked back then, it would not work today.